Christorian X's unified theory of Gunt. Strap yourselves in, boys and girls, and troons. It's time for my unified theory of Gunt. For those of you who don't like posts on psych or health issues, just skip this and or give me my puzzle piece now. After watching and then re-watching the truly monumental felting Ralph received from Jim and followed by Jarbo's final kick to the nuts, I realized there was some genuine insight that could be gleaned from Ralph's reactions and responses to his wishes for Daddy Jim. Before we get to this, though, let's put a few pieces of background in place. Firstly, we know Ralph has, for most, if not all of his life, been an angry fat kid. Treated terribly and then abandoned by Ronnie and at least raised unsuccessfully by Sandra. He, very likely, spent a great deal of time being bullied and ostracized at school, while most likely developing his own bullying skills to defend himself. Secondly are his addiction issues. I've seen a bunch of posts saying, why doesn't he stop drinking, pill-popping, snorting coke, or doesn't he realize how much this is hurting him? That's not how addiction works. When you're actively in the middle of addiction, it's not just a conscious choice. With alcohol, your brain and body become physically dependent on the alcohol to function. At this point, going off of it can cause terrible physical and mental stress or pain. It can literally kill you. The other drugs can make you chemically or psychologically dependent as well. That being said, an addict could literally sit in front of people they love, say that they hate themselves, and alcohol is killing them while there are parts of them pushing them to be pouring another drink as they say it. The addition of depression, physical problems, etc. is a nightmare. Finally, addictions of all types rewire how your brain handles dopamine and serotonin to the point where you need more and more just to return to level. It gets to the point where your brain needs constant hits from the addictions to just maintain a non-negative feeling. Thirdly is Ralph's physical health. Between his ever-growing body mass and alcohol consumption, it is extremely probable that he is suffering severe sleep apnea. The physical effects are high blood pressure, higher risk of diabetes, higher stress on the heart, and much more. Psychologically, it leans on the gas for depression, insomnia, deteriorated mental faculties, and confusion. You can refer to this article for more. Please note the increased inability to handle social situations and work, difficulty remembering things, and car accidents. Now that we have that out of the way, let's look at a few things in his felting with Jim. Starting out, we see he keeps attacking Jim for changing his name. He can't let go of it to a point of almost absurdity. The way he talks about it, it doesn't come across as just an insult, but it seems to genuinely enrage him as well. He repeatedly refers to Jim discarding the name his family gave him specifically. The idea of rejecting family, abandoning family, or cutting connection to your family doesn't seem just like a mistake or cowardly action. It comes across that Ralph sees it as an unforgivable sin. To Ralph, this is something Jim should feel great shame over. In fact, every attack Ralph has towards Jim are things he perceives that Jim should feel great shame over, which I believe is extremely key to understanding Ralph. Ralph is extremely fixated on shame and uses it to bully and manipulate others for profit and protection. We see this tactic in practically everyone he has attacked, most currently Gator and Jim. With Gator, his plan to paper his college work community with damaging info is a way to destroy and take from Gator something Ralph himself has never had. True friends, a loving family, people who like him. Ralph is extremely ashamed of who he is and feels it keeps him from having a life outside his streams. You see this when he screams at Jim, "This is my life," streams, super chats, etc. Ralph plans to use things he thinks people would find shameful to destroy something he is jealous of. We move on to Ralph attacking Jim's wife and insulting her weight and ethnicity. Ralph is ashamed of his weight, most certainly. He's also very ashamed and hurt that he lost possibly the one person who actually cared about him and liked him for who he was, Nora. Again, because of all the shame he has over his weight, his rejection by Nora, loss of a wife, etc. He lashes out and attacks Jim in those same areas under the belief that hurting someone there is powerful, having lived it firsthand. We know he doesn't feel attractive or loved due to his jealous outbursts, controlling behavior with women, and further with A.G. Luck, or Worski's story of Ralph's hiring of a prostitute 3 days in a row because she would kiss him. Another example would be after the revenge porn dropped. Once everyone started having a good public laugh about the Memphis Micro, he focuses in on Faith's loose vagina. Again, we see him taking something he feels shame for and trying to elicit that same feeling of shame in someone else to hurt them. The third prong of his attack is the COVID or cancer issues. Again, this attack is based out of extreme jealousy and shame. Firstly, many people, including Ralph, felt Jim's prediction of COVID's impact was way too extreme and was a significant misstep publicly. It was an embarrassing gaffe for Jim and clearly said and did something publicly unpopular. Secondly, Jim's cancer was a massive point of suspicion and conjecture, many believing that it was fake. Through these and other public mistakes or possible negative events, Jim's long-term popularity, viewership, and respect within his community has remained relatively unchanged. To Ralph, Jim has been able to publicly have significant vulnerable and negative moments while still walking away unscathed. This is something that Ralph has never been able to achieve. Every time he does something stupid, the world has a good laugh, as they should. The difference being that in general, Jim can own his bullshit. Jim even points this out. Ralph goes full-on counter-offensive at the drop of a hat. Clearly his public fuck-ups and ensuing mockery are a great source of shame. Pillstream, sex tape, everything about Portugal, etc. Moving on, we need to look at what drives Ralph's decision-making process as well as his knee-jerk reactions. For that, we need to first combine everything stated so far. Shame, bullying, abandonment, lack of high intelligence, growing up poor, etc. This all adds up to a very insecure, self-loathing rage pig. Kudos, Jim. Amazing term. Typically, at this point, you would just get your normal fat fucking white trash wigger. Then came podcasting streaming. Due to finding himself in the few right places at the right times and leeching onto some good guesses as up and incoming people, Ralph was able to actually develop an audience. Ralph actually found himself a stage with viewers. That's critical. We have to ask ourselves, where would a white trash wigger take notes from in order to know how to act on stage? It becomes pretty obvious as we start seeing Ralph incorporate many mannerisms and entertainment styles similar to professional wrestling. When gaining a viewership, Ralph had a moment to reinvent himself. He could create an identity that he would make people respect or be jealous of him. He could appear smart, confident, successful, everything. Ralph could be the Vince McMahon of the internet streamers. He could be that larger-than-life guy with all the cash, all the women, the status. Anyone who challenged him, he could fight and be the winner. All the other wrestlers would wrestle in his arena, the kill stream. Ralph had a way to distance himself from the shame. Meanwhile, he would find lackeys and outcasts that he could identify having the same lack of self-esteem and feelings of ostracization that he had and lure them into his game. All of his co-hosts are clearly people who needed a leader to tell them they mattered. They needed to feel they had purpose, attention, that they belonged somewhere. Anytime they questioned something, he knew how to press their shame and insecurity buttons extremely well because he is so aware of his own. The great blowout with Jim was the realization to Ralph that to Jim, he was just another Rand or Flamenco or Worski or Gator. He was just as weak and small and manipulable as Ralph's underlings were to him. Ralph had already felt abandoned by his father. He saw Jim and Dax as people whom were above him that accepted and cared about him. He over time started to think of himself as an equal and among friends. Sadly, he was never an equal, he was never a friend. Like Jim said, friends are people you go to barbecues with. Friends are people who spend time with you in your home, who you go to dinner with, etc. On to the final point. Jim makes clear multiple times the difference between the online and offline world. The subtext is that who we are online is not who we are offline. E-Celeb's online presence is that of a character. It's a show, and they embellish or emphasize certain parts of who they are, even outright lie, and manipulate how they are perceived to feed the image fans want. The people we see on the internet aren't really who they are, except for Ralph. During the fight, there are moments where Ralph acts really confused by how Jim is speaking to him. Like if he was in a WWE match and the guy he's wrestling isn't following the script. That the trash talk and threats are all part of this. When Jim doesn't buy into that and simply corners him on his lies, he's completely knocked off guard. He doesn't know how to function outside of the confines of the world he created for himself. Trash talking, threats, emotional attacks, all these wrestling moves, they don't work on confident people in real life. They don't work on people who accept and are comfortable with themselves. They don't work on reality. Ultimately, what we learn from all this is that Ralph has built his own mythology. He has already written the history book on himself before it's all even happened. Anything that challenges the narrative Ralph has written for himself re-engages all the shame, doubt, insecurity inside him, which causes him to lash out blindly with the only weapon he has, shame.